and welcome to a Book a Day podcast. Today I'm going to talk about a writer who is probably as Indian as he was Pakistani. He was born in Punjab during British India, and then he spent a number of years in Indian Punjab and Mumbai. Back then it was called Bombay, before he moved to Pakistan during the partition in 1947. Yes, I'm talking about Saadat Hasan Manto, who's probably the greatest short story writer when it comes to Indian writing. And he wrote quite a number of them, in fact, over 200 short stories. So, what I'm going to do in this episode and in the next one as well is I'm going to narrate a few short stories from the pen of Manto. One of the most famous short stories of his, it's kind of a satire on the partition of India and Pakistan. It's called Toba Tek Singh, and I have discussed that story in one of the earlier podcasts. And that's something that you always find in Manto's stories, that kind of rawness. There is satirical, humorous point that is always there. He's critiquing the society through his wit and charm, and you have to enjoy it. And you also get a clear idea of what the society was like, because his writing is so raw, so real. He takes you into this dark world of people's dark emotions, and he doesn't really hesitate pointing out the flaws in individuals or societies. So it's really a nice glimpse into the society and its dark corners. The story that I'm going to narrate now, it's called Doing God's Work, and I hope you'll enjoy it. So let's start. Let's start with this story called Doing God's Work. I'm from Gujarat, Kathiawad, in the west of India, and am a Baniya by caste, trader by tradition. Last year, when the world went topsy-turvy following the partition of the country, I was temporarily out of work, except for the odd buck I made through my cocaine deals. Thousands of refugees had begun moving from here to there and there to here. So one day I also decided to migrate to Pakistan. There would always be something to do, I said to myself. If not in cocaine, then something else. So I set out. It took me some time to get there, but in the end I managed, even making a little cash as I went along. Since I had moved to Pakistan to start a business, I began to study the situation carefully. The going thing seemed to be allotment of property left behind by the Hindus. Since I have the gift of the gab and I can get round people, I was able to make friends easily in the right quarters, and soon a house was allotted in my name. I sold it promptly, making a nice packet in the process. This looked promising, and I began to move from city to city, getting property allotted and disposing it off as soon as I had the documents. All work takes effort. Nothing in life is easy. Well, I could not hope to be an exception. It was a constant struggle. Sometimes flattery would get the necessary done. Other times a bribe or a dinner invitation, even a good time in the evening. What I do know is that I was constantly on my feet. I would arrive in a city, survey the residential areas, pick out a nice house, and then try to get hold of it. Hard work always gets rewarded, and so it happened that in a year's time, I had just managed to pile up a tidy fortune. I now had everything a man needs to live well: a nice house, plenty of cash in the bank, servants, a big car, not to mention commercial property. But I felt restless. When I was in cocaine, I sometimes used to get this strange depression, but it was nothing compared to what I was going through now. I felt under a kind of weight. What it was, I could not really define. I am an intelligent man. If something is bothering me, I always manage to find out what it is. I was determined to get the bottom of this one as well. What was wrong with me? Women? Well, I was unencumbered. I had lost my wife in Gujarat. However, there were other women. My gardener's wife, for instance. There's no accounting for taste. I believe that the only thing which matters in a woman is youth. It is not essential that she should have an education or to be able to dance or what you have. I can only speak for myself. I like them young. That's all. As I said, I am an intelligent man, and I knew that something was missing in my life. My business was okay, my bank account was growing by the day, and I had people working for me. In fact, I had reached a stage where money was coming in without much effort on my part. After much reflection, I found the answer. I was restless because I hadn't done a single good deed since coming to Pakistan. Back in Kathiawar, I had quite a few good deeds to my credit. For example, when my friend Pandurang died, I brought his wife to live in my house and thus was able to prevent her from getting into the oldest profession in the world for at least 2 years. Another friend, Vinayak, broke his wooden leg and I promptly bought him another. Cost me 40 rupees, and so on and so forth. However, I hadn't done anything by way of virtuous deed since moving to Pakistan, which was perhaps why my heart was restless. I tried to think how best to go about doing good deeds. Alms? Well, I walked around the city one day and found that it was full of naked and hungry wretches. Could I feed and clothe all of them single handed? What about setting up a community kitchen? Did not seem practical. It would mean buying huge quantities of food grains which could only be had on the black market. What would be the point in doing something morally reprehensible for the sake of a good deed? I spent hours every day listening to tales of woe and misfortune. Everybody had a sad story to tell. Those who slept on the street and those who lived in vast and expensive houses. The pedestrian was unhappy because he did not have a new and comfortable pair of shoes. The man who had the money to be chauffeured around was depressed because he could not afford to buy the latest model of car. In fact, all complaints were genuine and reasonable. I remembered a ghazal I had once heard Aminabai Chitalkar of Sholapur sing. One of the lines ran, "No man can fulfill another's need." So there I was, willing to help, but actually unable to do. There were just too many who needed aid. After much reflection, I came to the conclusion that charity was not the answer. I visited many refugee camps and found that because of charity, most of the inmates had become idle. They no longer wanted to work. I found them lolling around in the camps all day, playing cards or just gossiping, waiting all the while to be fed free of charge. How could these wretches do anything for Pakistan? I come to the conclusion That almsgiving was in no way akin to a good deed. So, what was I going to do? Hundreds of inmates were dying in these refugee camps. Epidemics were frequent and the city hospitals were full. I decided to construct a free hospital. I prepared the complete scheme. I would call for tenders, collect a tidy sum in tender fees, set up my own company, and give it to contract for, say, 100,000 rupees, and thus achieve my aim. However, I gave up the idea because what if I managed to save all those lives? Damn it, there would be a population explosion. How would the nation handle that? Come to think of it, the whole trouble was that there were too many people. While the size of the population kept increasing, the land that grew food remained the same size. The rainfall did not necessarily keep pace with the proliferating numbers. I therefore came to the considered conclusion that it was pointless to build a hospital. Then I thought of building a mosque. May God keep old Aminabai Chitulkar of Sholapur in his heavenly peace, for she used to sing something about doing a good deed to keep your name alive after you were gone. And what were the good deeds she used to sing of? Sinking wells and building bridges and constructing mosques? But this kind of thing was no good because there were far too many mosques in the city as it was. More mosques meant more fights among the believers, more sectarian divisions. I did not wish to add to them. I decided to go on a pilgrimage to Mecca instead. But before I could embark on my journey, God Himself provided me with an answer. There was a public rally in the city and it broke up in a complete pandemonium. 30 people were killed, trampled underfoot. When the story appeared in the papers the next morning, it was said that they had not been killed but martyred. This set me thinking. I called on various leading religious scholars in the city and was assured that those who died in the accidents were blessed because since it had not been their fault, martyrdom had been conferred on them. And that was the highest state of a man could aspire to. I said to myself, if instead of dying plainly, people could be martyred, wouldn't that be wonderful? What was the point of dying an ordinary death? A complete waste. It was martyrdom alone which could give meaning to a drab life. I did some more thinking on this delicate issue. I looked around, and what did I see? Hordes of miserable creatures with sunken eyes, their faces yellow with malnutrition, crushed by the weight of poverty, walking about like ghosts in tattered clothes. They looked like junk thrown on the rubbish heap, living in ramshackle huts, crawling about the city bazaars like unclaimed animals. Why were these people alive? I asked myself. What were they living for and how? Nobody knew. There they were, dying by the thousand, dying of hunger and thirst, dying of cold, dying of heat, and what was more, dying unmourned, unremembered. And when they died, what happened to them? Nothing at all. So I hit upon my great idea. Why should these people not die as martyrs instead of living in perpetual hunger, sickness, and pain? Why should they not win for themselves a place of honor, become the subject of veneration among those who did not even want to look at their ravaged faces today? The question was, would these people be willing to be martyred? I was confident they would, because they were good Muslims, and all good Muslims longed for the exalted state of martyrdom. Even Hindus and Sikhs were now aspiring to martyrdom. I was therefore extremely disappointed when I was told by an emaciated wretch that he had no such ambition. I just could not understand what this miserable creature was going to get out of being alive. I tried to argue with him. I said, "Look, my friend, you're an old man, and you're not likely to live more than a month or a month and a half. As it is, you're so weak and you cannot even walk. When you go into one of your coughing fits, it's a wonder that you come out of it at all. You haven't a penny to your name. You have never had a day of comfort in your life. There's no question of a future in your case. Why do you want to live? For what? You're just too old to join the army. Otherwise, you might have had a chance to die fighting for your country. Why not make arrangements to get martyred?" "How can that be arranged?" he asked. So I explained to him now. Lying in front of you on the ground is a banana skin. Suppose you were to slip on it, it is obvious you wouldn't survive the shock and would die and become a martyr. However, he did not buy my argument. Instead, he said, "You think I am so out of my mind that I should let myself slip on that banana skin with my eyes open? Don't I love life?" My God, that was what that miserable bag of bones said. He thought he was living life. His attitude really depressed me. I was even more depressed when I heard a couple of days later that he, who could so easily have attained martyrdom, had died coughing on a bare steel bed in a charity hospital. Then there was this woman with no teeth in her mouth and no intestines in her belly. She looked as if she would breathe her last any minute. I felt very sorry for her. All her life had been spent in grief and poverty. I lifted her up in my arms and placed her on the railway track. But as soon as she heard the train approach, she bounced up like a wound-up toy on a spring and ran away. It broke my heart, but I did not give up. I had seen the straight and narrow path of virtue, and I was not going to be deflected so easily. There was an empty building in the city dating back to the time of the Mughal kings. There were exactly 151 tiny rooms in it. With my experienced eyes, I estimated at once glance that the first big rain would bring its leaking roof down. I bought the place up for a few thousand rupees and let it out to about 1,000 homeless people, charging them no more than a rupee a month. For 2 months, I received rent, and as I had estimated at the beginning of the third, the first rains came to the city and the roof caved in, martyring 700 men, women, and children. My heart felt light. There were now 700 less to feed and clothe in the world, and what was more, they had all attained martyrdom and gone to heaven. My good work has continued. No day passes when 2 or 3 people do not drink the sweet cup of martyrdom through my efforts. All work needs labor, and as old Aminabai Chitlkar of Sholapur used to sing, but let that pass. I cannot recall the words. Suffice it to say that I have had to try very hard to attain my noble objective. There was one miserable creature whom I was unable to dispatch to heaven, after having thrown banana skins in his path about 10 times. However, like death, martyrdom is preordained, and one day he slipped in his bathroom and joined the exalted company of martyrs. These days, I'm engaged in constructing a huge residential building. The contract, worth 200,000 rupees, is being executed by my own company. I'm sure to make a profit of at least 75,000 rupees. I've also had the building insured. I estimate that when the third story is raised, the whole thing will come tumbling down, for such are the substandard materials I have used. And of the 300 men who are engaged in the construction work, given luck, not one should survive, but immediately attain eternal martyrdom. And if there are survivors, it would mean that they are sinners, and God, who is merciful and compassionate, is not willing to admit them to the exalted state of martyrdom. So, there it is. That was Manto's another dark short story for you. I hope you had a good time listening to it, and I will narrate a few more in the next episode. So stay tuned, and don't forget to share your feedback with me, and that's something that I always look forward to. So keep following, keep sending me your messages, and take care. Thank you very much for listening.